Hello, good morning. We were supposed to start working on the part of this book idea thing is that I have this landing page, and we need to implement like this MailChimp thing because I'm going to send emails and stuff, which is a little bit interesting. But yeah, so it's basically like finishing that landing page and then like find the teaser content for to ask people if they're actually interested in reading such a book. Again, I'm not sure if this is a good stream content, but anyways, we'll try it. But I don't have that much time today, so what I thought we would do is we looked at these the XState catalog, and we looked at like what's for me, there's like good and bad things, right? Every solution has a good and a bad part to it. So for me, this visual overview is actually, maybe it's just because I'm not used to the visual overview, but for me, this is harder to reason about than, it's harder for me to reason about than like looking at an actual implementation. I guess we don't even have to look at this one. Yeah, maybe I'm just not used to it. Because it's supposed to, okay, so I'm active. And these are like, is these events? These are events. And I can enable it. And then there are these parallel things, which is unfocused, focus, blur, change. Done, valid, change. Yeah, it goes back to pending. Port invalid. Oh well. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Well, like the biggest gain here is that even though this declarative thing gets like overly complex, I guess that's the thing I want to compare. It's not a visual overview, because that's like, with a visual representation you will always be better than actual code, but it's this declarative overview that I think it's overly complex. But the thing is that by having this kind of data structure underneath, that's what makes it possible to create visualization on top. And currently the visualization is only just looking at this object and then producing the visual overview. But it will be possible to actually build this object with a visual tool, and that's when it starts to get really interesting. So that's going to be super, super fun. And I guess like the biggest concern I have is it's basically TypeScript, because XState isn't that great at TypeScript. And that's because it wasn't written with TypeScript in mind from the get-go. But I do really hope when they do have that visual tool, that when you consume the state machine, they have like really good typing. So that's going to be super interesting to see when that's being released. I think that's going to be like a major thing. But no matter, I was just playing around with it. So I wanted to like express this stuff in React states just to see how it looked like. And in terms of implementation, I find it to be quite explicit. Like we have a focus context. That's what's interesting. Like React states work differently than XState. So in XState you have like a single context where you can have a very complex nested machine, which means that you have to, on this context, you start to get into the problem that state machines actually tries to solve, which is to say that you have within the explicit states you have certain values. Like that's one of the really good things that it does, but that's not possible here because this error message is actually only available inside the invalid state, but there's no way to express that with typing. But you can do that with React states. So here you have focus context, where it's focused, unfocused. You have a validation context, where it's pending, valid, invalid, and here we see the error message. And then we have the actual input context, where we have a active and disabled state, where within the active state, we have a focus and validation context. And we always have a value there when we're actually active. So that's also interesting. Like we say that we have a value when we're not, when it's disabled, which is, well, it's not true. Well, that's arguably not true. And then we have the input actions. And what's even more interesting about this, if we take advantage of React states, is that we can say validate success. That's a symbol. Like this is not something you're going to trigger from the outside. That would be bad actually. And validate error is not something to be triggered from the outside. So we'll rather do this. And then type of error. While the other things is stuff that you actually do want to trigger from the outside. So we have validate error and we have validate success. And then we have validate success. So these are now internal action dispatches, which is really nice. And this is also typed. So if we use this from the outside, let me, by the way, let me make this bigger. So if we trigger this from the outside, where do we have dispatch? We have change. Now you see they aren't even there because they're symbols. So that's pretty cool, right? So we're actually making it more constrained this way. That's always a good thing. And then I started to reflect a little bit on how we do this thing. And I just realized that when you have these nested contexts, like either this is a pattern within React, well, or I discovered a new pattern without React state within React states, because you have these use states, but you also have the actual underlying like map, exec, and even transition is there. And those can be used to, like if you have a subtype of the context, like there are only certain states you want to map on, you can do that using the map, and then pass in the context explicitly. So like you have a function that receives a subset of the context, and then you can use map on that context and it's automatically typed. So it's only that subset of states that it will actually yell at you. And it's the same for exec. And I realized here we have this thing, but we can actually do this. Let's see. I think. So we have exec. We have... Oh, sorry. Input exec. And then we have active. And then we should be able to say like how should we, okay, let's just write it out first. So we have context, and then we can say exec context. Yeah, we can even, which one was it? Was it oh, what was it? It was, I forgot. Pending. Of course, we want to react to pending. So we can just go in here and we can grab the validation. And then we can say, because this is a context in itself. So we can say exec validation. And then pending. And then we do our thing. And then we should be able to say, well, this is where we get the value from. Yes, this is interesting. So what we do is that whenever things change here and we are on active, we just continue to execute on the nested contexts. So we're executing on the validation context. And here we want to say when we're in pending, we want to do this thing. And since this returns a subscription, this is returned by active, which is returned to use effect. So this clear timeout will just kind of propagate up to the use effect. So it should work the same way now. He did it. It doesn't look like it worked. Oh, it did. Just took, wow, that took a long time. Was that 2 seconds? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Cool. Yeah, so that's working. That felt like more than 2 seconds. Yeah, so this is interesting. Like, I didn't realize before testing this that React states actually it supports nested states, but you don't define it as like parallel and then you have these states. You just create a nested context. And what's interesting about the nested context is that well, it's like more explicit, and you also have related values to that nested context. And like in XState, you have to bring all the values up to the root context, which I find interesting. Like, I'm not saying that React states, like, you can't really compare these two solutions because there is a, like, I don't think I could like make anything better out of a declarative API doing it like this. This is really well thought out, and it's using a declarative API so that you can have this visualization. So you can never build visualization on top of React states. Like, you can do like the debugging. Yeah, you can do the debugging, and you can actually visualize the same during debugging, like at runtime. But you wouldn't have like a static representation of the machine. Maybe, like, I guess, yeah, this is interesting. Like, we could use like, I've been using TS Morph, which is just an amazing AST traverser and modifier. So what you could do here is, okay, so you have this file, it expects you to, well, does it even need, it just needs to look for use states, and then it knows what states you have by looking at these, and it knows what actions you can trigger, and it knows what state you're moving to. This is interesting. Huh. Like, there is some complexity in expressing moving to a different state. So for example, like here, it's like very explicit. You just say, like, you actually name them like this, right? So that makes it easier. But yeah, this is interesting. But yeah, I'm kind of hanging on to see how much value the visual creator does. Like, one thing I wonder about the XState visual creator is, like, how would you like open a file? Like, how would you actually put, like, if you open a project, I guess you wouldn't open your project in this visual tool, because like, how would it find all the machines? You could define them anywhere. So I wonder if it expects like a special file format, for example. So you kind of create your machines as these files that you can import and then kind of put them into an actual machine. Like, so basically what you do is you create a JSON file, I guess. And you can import that JSON file and put it into the actual runtime API of XState, where you do assign the actual actions and stuff. Yeah, maybe it's like a TypeScript file even that exports like an object. It exports this object and it exports the typing, which is really cool, because then you can be way more explicit about the typing. And then you rather manually have to implement these, which of course you have to do. But yeah, it's really interesting, because it's like if you write a declarative library, typing is insanely difficult to do. Like it's to the extent where it doesn't really work. As we can see in XState, there are limitations to what you can do with typing with this kind of API. But when you move that declarative API into a visual tool, like you actually build the declarative structure visually, then you can just generate the typing that it represents. You can be way smarter about the typing. So it's like, yeah, so if you take it further, then it becomes even more powerful, because then you can do typing that you even couldn't do with like a proper API or a friendly API for typing, which I find really fascinating. Yeah, it is interesting indeed. I wonder what this is like. Send report invalid. Target. So if it's pending and it sends report invalid, but what is this validate field? Undone, it's valid? What's undone? That's weird. I don't understand how. This is not very explicit. Anyways, let's look at, yeah, so this is, I just wanted to see this, how this would work, like having a nested context, and how you could like create side effects on that. And this is like, I'm not saying this is like straightforward. This is also confusing to some extent. Like we're executing on the input when it's active, we're executing on validation when it's pending. I don't know. Like for me, it makes total sense, but I've been working on this for quite some time now. Yeah. Interesting. What I do really like though is that it actually does deal with parallel and like what's it called? State blow-ups. So you are actually able to have a root context and then split them into multiple parallel contexts. That's really interesting, because then we're kind of starting to dive into, I guess there are properties to like state charts. But yeah, I find this like properties to state charts that's not part of this, but it's interesting how far you can get with this API. Anyways, do we have another one? Well, I got 10 minutes. I wanted to try another one as well. Maybe we can. Yeah, so this is really interesting. So let's try to just, what's this one called? Oh, we tried some TSMO for XState. It's a powerful paradigm, but very good. Yeah, one potential plan is to compile the visually build machine to JSON. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have high hopes for. By the way, thanks for looking in, Matt. Yeah, I have high hopes for XState, and like just abstracting away all the complexity of what you actually see in the code and the typing. So you just have this very straightforward visual way of building things, and then the output can be complete garbage, like it can be. And the only thing you need to do is just import the garbage as a variable and put it into like a runtime thing, and then it just works. And you don't have to think about all this stuff. It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit about in Flutter or in Dart, they have MobX. But like in JavaScript, MobX it looks quite good in JavaScript itself, because we have proxies and stuff. But you don't have that in the Dart language. So at least the last version I saw, you would have to run this process next to it, which for me is just horrible. You can't like run a process next to, like this should just work within the language. But I guess coming from Dart, that's perfectly fine. Anyways, it generates code to actually do the observable stuff. So so for me, it's a little bit weird that you import something that you're not going to use. Like it looked a little bit weird, but at the same time, like doing this like pre-processing where the implementation would just be too complex to do manually, it's really interesting. I'm a little bit split on it, because I guess I'm a little bit of a purist, where I love this thing when you express something in this constrained language that is super powerful, and at the same time it's very readable for a human. But at the same time, it's like there are limits to how far you can go with that purist mindset. At some point, you do want to do things that are way more powerful, where it just completely breaks. Like you can't use the language features in a way that also makes it super readable. But if you rather build a tool on top that's like more readable than any code could ever be, like a visual tool, and then that produces the unreadable code, which you'd never really have to look at, then it's yeah, there's something there. Like I think sorry, I'm just talking here. I think like at some point like it depends on where you do programming, but especially with web applications, there's so much innovation going on. So I think that's one of the fields within programming that we're going to see where we almost only work with visual tools. And you kind of see it already. You have these solutions like for static websites, which is way simpler than an actual application. But at the same time, you start seeing these tools like, I have a colleague, Sid, who built these UI dev tools, which allows you to basically do all the styling of your application in the application. Like you implement the components, you just click them in the application, and when you change the styling using Tailwind, it actually saves it in the file and stuff. Like it's super awesome. And that's so much better than sitting inside code and doing it. Okay, I'm not sure if we have time to actually express this thing. What was it called? Use create update form. Use create update form DSX. Let's just try to do like a quick one here. So we had a submitting context. And again, I really like this, like having a nested context. You don't only have nested states, but you actually have nested contexts. I like that. To create update form context. And we have, what were the states? We have checking if in edit mode. Oh, I do this, checking if in edit mode. And we have fetching item to edit. Yeah, what is this thing actually? A common pattern in CRUD application is to reuse the same components for creating. Yeah, that's true. The state machine handles both cases, including data. Oh, including data fetching when in update mode, validating the inputs and calling the correct create edit method when submitting. Yeah. Iron.platform. Platform? Yeah. Interesting. Well, I don't have time to go through this, so I don't think we're going to continue. But well, maybe we can just write the states there, because that gives us something to like summarize on. Failed to fetching, failed to fetch, failed to fetch, and then we have awaiting submit. Awaiting submit. And where does it, like submitting is related to, oh sorry, submitting. But is submitting like submit? So submitting happens. That's the state in itself. Oh, this is interesting because this is a little bit different. So we also have a state called submitting, but that in itself, yeah, this is interesting. Oh, check if in edit. Oh, this is interesting. Check if in. Oh, this is interesting. So you have a root state of checking if in edit mode, and you have the same checking if in edit mode when you're submitting. You have the same state in two different places. Oh, I have to read through this to understand how it actually works. Why would you want to do this two different places? Yeah, because that's also a thing. Like, how much are you bound to the API itself? Like, when you want to express a concept, how bound are you to the API? That's also very interesting. So what I mean is like, okay, so this is the XState API. And in this case, we're comparing it with the React States API. And again, they're very different solutions. But I wonder how you would choose to express this using the React States API. Would you use the same? Oh, look at this. Is in edit. Oh. This is, I have to make a pun here because is in edit mode. This is like, this is not good. Like, this is exactly what you don't want to have in a state machine. It's these Boolean things. Maybe maybe it makes sense in this case, but like as a default, you shouldn't have these flags. But I think you can't get away with that because you just have this single context. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, I have to go. I think, yeah, it's just fun to look at these examples and reflect on them. Maybe, but I do want to get on with the other stuff. Maybe we should rather do that. And then we can, like, when it's boring with the book thingy, we can jump into one of these examples because they're just fun. Like, spend half an hour with one of these machines, reason about why it's expressed this way related to the XState API, the good things, the bad things typically being TypeScript related, and then just try it in React states just for fun, just to learn something. Like just looking at the simple input thing, I learned that, oh, we're actually able to express nested contexts and basically nested states, which I haven't even thought about. So yeah, I'm learning a lot looking at these examples. So yeah, it's an awesome project. So I'm super happy about that. It will be super useful for people, that's for sure. Anyways, bye for now, and I guess we'll talk tomorrow.